Good morning. How are you all doing? You okay? We're still on that summertime. I know it's dropped a bit cooler, hasn't it? But we're still on summertime. I know there's people away and whatnot, but bring lots of energy, okay, this morning? Yeah? Sound good? Now, I wanted to talk this morning about honour. Kind of a strange thing, I guess. Do you hear people in society talk about honour much these days? It's not really. I feel like society, we've got two extremes of honour that we see. There's either no honour, there's sort of no common honour to someone else, or there's too much honour and it's almost borderline worship. Does that make sense? So I wanted to look at this sort of idea and the theology of it, because one of the things going into Bible college for me is actually honour is quite an important part of the Bible. But it might be something that we don't think about as much. But first, a few weeks ago, Judah was talking to Esther, and I think they were in kids' church. They're doing something. And I think they were role-playing church, right? And I think one of them was pretending to get on the stage and to preach. And Esther asked Judah, and so what do you think they're doing? And Judah said, well, what do you think Dada does when he gets on stage? And, because they've just gone down. He says, well, they talk about what was good and what was bad of the music, don't they? I thought, are you kidding me? All this time, and that's what you think we do? Like they think after the worship, we just all sit around and we talk about what was good and what was bad about it. I'm like, are you for real? Like, I thought that was pretty funny though, wasn't it? But so then we obviously had to explain, no, as you're doing your Bible story downstairs, we're sort of doing the same upstairs. So today I wanted to look at honour. And I suppose the opening scripture from 1 Samuel 2-30, it says this: those who honour me, I will honour. Those who despise me, me shall be lightly esteemed. Or other versions are a bit harsher in their language. So even though there's a specific context there, we do see this principle spread across the Bible. And I wanted to see what do you think about it? Because we may not even all agree on this principle or how it's outworked. It's interesting to maybe after the service have a chat with someone and see what you think of this. Because we're seeing this principle that some scholars would say it's like a mirroring. That God is sort of reacting. He's mirroring the level of, I guess, honour you show him. Does that make sense? It says here, those who honour me, I will honour. Now, specific context, but we do see this theme again and again in the Bible. So how does that sit with you first of all? Do you think about honour much? Because it's not a word we tend to use. And if I think to myself, how do I show honour in my life? How do I honour God? These are things that perhaps we don't look at every day, but we see this principle. If you honour God, he will honour you. Now, it creates a bit of an awkward tension, doesn't it? Because you're thinking, okay, well, what is the implication there? Okay, so if I'm not honouring God, what is the effect of that? What do you think? Anyone want to venture a guess? This is where we may get some disagreements. It can be an awkward thing to grapple with. Because if it's saying, if I honour God, he will honour me, there's an implication that, okay, so if I'm not honouring God, will he honour me in return? We'll leave that there for now, okay? Because we may have different answers. Some are going to say, yes, of course he will, because he's God. And others might say, well, no, he is going to reflect the level you give him, because he's not going to force himself upon you, right? We'll come back to that. Now, we see different examples where honouring, it costs something. Right, so we see an example of Daniel. When they were captured, they were in a foreign land, and you know how the story goes. There was a lot of pressure to renounce your previous gods and to come under the new system that the king had set up to worship himself. There was a lot of pressure there. I think sometimes we don't really understand the amount of pressure these people would have been under. It's quite easy for me to get up on a Sunday and preach or speak of God, because there's no, thankfully, but there's no real pressure to stop that. Does that make sense? Now, we see lots of times in the Bible where honor when commitment, it really did have to get put to the test. Because there were not these neutral spaces where it's like, well, you think that, I think this. It was sort of, but if I think this and I practice this, it could cost me my life. Does that make sense? And like I said, I'm torn. I'm very thankful I'm not in that position. But at the same time, you then you've not really been under the same situation. The honor we show or the commitment we show, it doesn't have the same cost, right? I think that's fair to say. We're not quite in the same position as Daniel, are we? I think some of the biggest things we have to contend with in the Western church, I think really are apathy. It's a different type of persecution. I almost don't want to use that word because I don't want it to undermine the very real persecution people are going under. But I feel in the West, it's more of a sense of apathy. It's a disinterest. It's not necessarily, if I proclaim the name of Jesus, I'm worried about the opposition. It's just, I don't really have much drive or desire to. Does that make sense? It's like a different spirit almost. But here we see, in particularly some of these stories, such a cost. Daniel had to make such a choice. Do I want to honor God in this situation? Quite literally, and him and his friends, quite literally, are we going to stay stood up when everyone else bows? When that horn, when that siren, that gong goes, and you know the story, everyone would have to go down and worship. Are they going to stay stood upright, showing that actually they still hold fast to the faith in their God? What do you think about that? How would you feel in that situation? A bit of peer pressure. If everyone else is bowing down, they're under the system, and you quite literally have to stay stood up. There's no way to hide. It's like it's an amazing metaphor in and of itself. You are literally above sight. Everyone will see. They'll be like, there's Barry. He's not bowed down. What is he doing? If the king sees him, Barry, get down. He's like, no. Do you see what I'm saying? Because it's a level of pressure that I guess, yes, thankfully we've not felt. But at the same time, can we be inspired by what we see? Daniel, he honored God by refusing to come under this new system, this pressure. And in turn, we know the story has its ups and downs, but in the long run, we see that was to their benefit. That this act of honoring God in a place where they shouldn't have been doing that brought through some breakthrough in the future. A place, an environment where they shouldn't have honored God. It wasn't sensible to honor God. It wasn't safe to honor God. But they did that, and breakthrough came. Does that make sense? So keep that as a thought. Grapple with that. And we're going to come back to that a little bit later. Now, a question to ask ourselves. Does our daily life, does it reflect a life that honors God? What do you think? We'll all be different. Some of us will be like, yeah, everything I do is honoring God. Others maybe you think, well, I don't really think about it. I've never thought about it in those terms. I don't look at it through that framework. But if we were to reflect, where does my heart sit on that scale? Does my daily life reflect that God is my highest priority? That's a hard one, isn't it? This is one of those preachers where it's so easy to get up and say it, but trust me, I'm looking at myself as well. It's such a tough one. I think, does my life reflect that God is my highest priority? I think, well, maybe some days it does, but maybe other days, I don't know. I guess saying I don't know means I do know. It can be a difficult thing to examine our own hearts, because again, with Daniel, he couldn't afford to just be a bit apathetic, could he? He couldn't have, this is the system. It will, okay, Sarah, what will be, will be. I don't want the fuss, to be quite honest, you know. A lot of you know my story about school. I was a stealth Christian, you know what that is, don't you? You're a Christian, but you're sort of in hiding. You sort of, I recognize this is not the default mindset of this environment, therefore I keep it to myself. And that was sort of my mindset in school, stealth Christian. And while that maybe worked for me at the time, you look at these people in the Bible, you know, who we would maybe regard heroes of the faith, and that was not really a mindset that they possessed, was it? Daniel wasn't really a stealth Christian, or rather he got to the point where he couldn't be any longer. And having that belief, for a time, it cost him. And he didn't necessarily know what the outcome was going to be by standing strong within that. So there's one aspect, the first sort of point I wanted to look at is honor begins with God. That whatever language we want to use, the Bible paints this principle that in some level we have to honor God. It can be quite a strange, almost unnatural thing to do, but there is that principle there. Now, the second point, and this is the awkward one for me, this creates a lot of tension. It says that as Christians, we also have to honor God's servants and the leaders he puts over us. How does that, this is where I think this does not sit well with society. Like, this is not something I remember being taught at school. There was no sense of we honor people. See, when we was in Bible college, we was looking at the difference between the culture of when Jesus was doing what he was doing, his ministry, and what the normal Jewish culture, and then later on for Paul, the Greek culture would be. And there's a lot of similarities between it today. A lot of it was built on status, right? It was this upward bound race for honors, some scholars would call it. Life was about who can accumulate the most honor for themselves, and then that increases their power and esteem, and the rest of society has to respond to that, right? But we know as Christians, we're big on this principle that God sees his servants as high, doesn't he? And we don't even like that word, but those who serve the kingdom, God sees as high. It's this flipping around of the scales. Romans 12:10 says this: be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. Easy to say, right? That is a tough scripture. Is it not? There's a bit of apathy. It's like, have you all mastered that? That's tough, isn't it? To honor someone else. And we see the golden rule reflected in that. Because what does Jesus teach? What does God teach? To love your neighbor as yourself. To treat someone as you would like to be treated. Part of that, the golden rule. First, it's God. We love God with all our mind, heart, body, soul. But then we love our neighbor as ourselves. There's honor built into that, isn't there? We might not frame it in that way, but when you love someone as you love yourself, you treat someone as you would like to be treated. There is honor built into that. If we're ever at a loss, we think, well, we're having to do this with Judah, you see. The way he frames things, the way we're trying to get him to think and to expand his empathy and understanding, the way we're having to do it is we're asking him, okay, and if someone did that to you, how would you feel? You know what I'm saying? It's such a basic, simple thing, but we can often forget to just do that. You think, oh no, Judah, don't say that to them, or don't do this or that to them. How would that make you feel? How would you like to be treated in that situation? And that is something that we can all reflect on, right? Have you ever been on the receiving end of something that you would rather not? Something, yeah? You've been on it maybe in the workplace or a friend or something like that. Have you ever felt dishonored? Yeah, we're getting some, yeah. Yeah, we've all been there. Ever felt dishonored in in a Christian context? Like, maybe, hopefully not right now. But I mean, yeah, I have. I've been in church over 30 years, grown up in the church. It happens. But how do we bring that? How do we show that honor to each other? Can anyone hear a buzzing? Is there a bit of a buzzing on one of those channels? Just have a play around with it forward. Now, 1 Timothy 5:17, the elders who direct the affairs of the church well are worthy of double honor, especially those whose work is preaching and teaching. Thank you. That's why it's awkward, I say. I say, because maybe I come into some of that bracket. This is the awkwardness of it, because this is not about me. But it's this principle we see throughout the Bible, which, again, isn't that natural to me. Now, we go on Hebrews 13:17. Have confidence in your leaders and submit to their authority, because they keep watch over you as those who must give an account. Do this so that their work will be a joy and not a burden, for that would be of no benefit to you. It's quite funny, that, isn't it? Do this so it will be a joy, not a burden. Now it's unpacking a little more of the root of it. It's not just honor for honor's sake, is it? It's because, as the book of James says as well, not everyone should teach because they will be judged more strictly. So now we're seeing a pattern. The honor we give, maybe to those in leadership, to even some of the earthly authorities, there's a reason for that, and there's an authority given for a purpose. It's not just for the fun of it, is it? So here, do this so that their work will be a joy, because they keep watch over you as those who must give an account. And I don't think this ever stops. This isn't just thinking of, pastor and church. This is anyone within the church world that has influence, leadership. Does that make sense? And the reason I think this is so important is because we can so easily be influenced by the wrong thing. We live in a time where I guess the Bible would call it itching ears. It's never been easier to have your ears tickled, has it? Basically we can find whatever teaching, whatever theology we want to prescribe to, you can find it somewhere online. We could go right now, any viewpoint, you could throw a viewpoint out to me, and we'd probably just go and Google something, and we'd probably be able to find something promoting that viewpoint, which in one sense it's great that there's so much information there, but on the other hand, it makes it very difficult to then stay in what we would regard as truth, because there's so much available. So we see that discernment becomes really important to that. Now, the counter to this, as I've said, those who must give an account. When I was thinking about this, I was reflecting, how does the church today do with this? Because I think this is what I said at the beginning. It's sort of a spectrum of honor that we take from the world. On this side of the scale, it's sort of, we see no honor. People who don't want to treat each other with any basic respect. Maybe you can just go online and you might see that happening. Someone's got a viewpoint, they've said something online, and they've got a barrage of comments against them, having a go at them. It's like, and you've never even met. You don't know each other. It's an honorless, when that happens, that can be an honorless thing. Does that make sense? There's no basic level of respect. It's like, okay, well, I'm just putting a view out there. You might not agree with it, but we don't need to decide we hate each other. Does that make sense? We can hopefully talk and have dialogue and communicate in a way that's civil with honor. So that sort of exists. We see that a lot, I'd probably say, right? That's fair enough. If you venture online, you've got to be brave to put some comments online, because you're gonna get some stick for whatever, okay? Now, the other side we see is, I think maybe that we've got it from, can I say, maybe the celebrity culture, perhaps, where honor, it can go to the other end, and it's a bit too extreme. And if I'm honest, I've seen, through a multitude of churches, I've seen both of these. I've seen some where I think, well, that's just not fair, be good to people. And others where it's like, I feel uncomfortable, because the level of honor that is almost being required, it seems too much. It seems like this idea of celebrity pastors. You heard of that, right? We've probably all heard of that. And I get it. It's like pastors all over the world with a lot of influence, but almost the very name, the very nature of that kind of causes me tension a little bit, because I think the very idea of a celebrity pastor or celebrity leader, I then take back to Jesus and I think, but is that how he viewed himself? Is that what he did? And here's an example. If you're not with me at the minute, maybe you'll be with me in about 30 seconds. So I saw this example. I won't name them, but it was a Christian leader, influencer, and they were doing an event. And if you wanted to go to this event, you could buy the VIP package. Does that sound good? Yes, I'll take 2. You could buy the VIP package. What would that get you, do you think? You got to meet them. It was you get a meet and greet, right? You get a picture with them. That's good. You could put that online. That'll get you some likes, okay? I'm being a bit sarcastic here, if you can't tell. How much do you think that would be? What would that be worth? I know it's hard without, I'm not going to name the person, but without saying who, what would that be worth to you? What do you think? $5,000. $5,000. It was dollars, $5,000 for a meet and greet and a picture with this I just said it off the tongue, Freudian, with this Christian leader. It just didn't sit with me. I thought, I don't know about that. I just think, I can't imagine Jesus doing that. I mean, he never did do that. He didn't get his disciples up and say, I want you to go to town and tell them I'm doing this meet and greet package, all right? If they just bring whatever they've got, bring the tribute, and they get to meet me. It was the exact opposite, wasn't it? With Jesus, he was like, no, I'm gonna go to whoever needs me. I am there for everyone. And what he gives, he gave for free. Isn't that? It's just. Do you see that tension that I was feeling with that? That's what do you do with that? Because there's those extremes again. I've seen this where there's no honor, but I think maybe paying $5,000 for a meet and greet is probably not the way, if we can be so bold to say. But what's difficult is there's lots of people signing up. People thought it was a good deal. And I'm like, we're all different, aren't we? Because when I look at my Bible, that's not the way. That wasn't that. Jesus didn't do it. He's my example at the end of the day. It doesn't matter how much influence a certain leader or pastor's got or whatever, my example is Jesus. I didn't see him do that. I put it in the notes here, the Lord's meet and greet. We can joke about it because we know he was available to everyone, wasn't he? That was the very thing, the very nature. He said that you don't send the healthy to a doctor. It is the sick, if I can use that example. It is the people who need salvation, which is actually all of us. He is there for all of us. And he doesn't gatekeep it. He doesn't put a barrier. He doesn't say, unless you do this much or tithe this much or give that much. He doesn't say any of that. He says, I am just here for you. And he doesn't gatekeep it. Isn't that amazing? And that is something that hopefully would be worthy of honor. Because we can't get that in the world. Unfortunately, and I get there may be practical reasons, but you can't just go and have the ear of whoever you want. But with Jesus, he says, I will always be available. Now, the last point 3, before we go into communion, and this is where I wanted to bring in some more of that tension that we're going to wrestle with. And again, have a chat with each other after. I want to see where you sit on this theological spectrum here now, okay? Mirroring point 1 a little bit. In Mark 6:4-5, it says, Jesus said to them, a prophet is not without honor except in his own town, among his relatives and in his own home. He could not do any miracles there except lay his hands on a few sick people and healed them. He was amazed at their lack of faith. So this is where we're bringing in a bit of that perspective from point one again. I want to know where you sit here. The story to this is Jesus was saying he was from Nazareth, wasn't he? We know about Nazareth. People didn't really like it. It wasn't a great place. We use the example a lot. But his hometown, they knew him. They knew him from being a boy. And he's saying a prophet is not without honor except in his own town, among his own relatives and among his own home. And then he goes on to say, in that place, in his hometown, he could not do many mighty miracles. It says except heal a few sick people, which we would probably be like, well, that's revival, that's great. He's classing that as that's not great, that's not much. Here is the question I want to pose to you, where I think we will probably have, maybe there'll be different theological perspectives even here, right? Grapple with this. When it says that Jesus could not do any miracles there, because of the ground, the faith, the honor or lack thereof he was receiving. What does that mean? Do you think that means he physically could not do a miracle there? Or do you think it's that a miracle, it was mirroring the level of faith he was seeing? What do you think? It's an interesting point, isn't it? Because we know on the one hand, and I like to think deeply about things, but you can get yourself into a bit of a hole, when you think too deeply about things. But we believe, or rather the broadest view in the Christian Bible is that he is all-powerful. Now, even getting into a definition of what that means can be very difficult, because when we're trying to define what all-powerful even means, it can be a bit of a paradox and contradiction to us. But that is the viewpoint we're sort of presented. God is all-powerful, or he has all authority. So then if we're given a situation where it says he could not do any miracles there, as some people have already said, it would lead you to believe, and some scholars have said, that it's not that he couldn't, but a mirroring of the faith taking place. Almost like a principle or a faith system. Not that he's being stood there arms crossed like, well, you've not had enough faith. But it's almost like a spiritual system that is in place. Does that make sense? So it's like, what level of faith am I bringing? He's not being there begrudging, saying, oh no, if you had more faith. But actually, the inner position of my faith has a mirroring effect on what is taking place spiritually. Likewise, if I close myself off to everything spiritual, it is not impossible, but it's probably more likely that you will not experience anything spiritual. Does that make sense? It's sort of in the same way. And that's difficult because it can, on the one hand, if you think it too deeply, it can seem a little bit cold, but I'd see it as more of a spiritual system, not God being there like, you need more faith, you. Because we know, we have to read Scripture through the lens of the entire Bible. We know overall, he's loving, he's caring. The whole point is for our benefit.